The penultimate college football playoff rankings have been revealed. But did the committee get it right?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. I am your host, Matt Galatzan. Thank you for tuning into Locked On Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. Harrison, the college football playoff rankings, the penultimate rankings have been revealed following Texas A&M's loss to Texas last week. There's been a lot of changes, some very, very interesting changes. So we're going to talk about those rankings. We're going to ask if, did they get it right? Look at Texas A&M's potential first-round matchup, and then talk a little bit more about that Texas A&M debacle in Austin. But let's start with the rankings, Harrison. First things first, no significant changes at the top there. We have Ohio State coming in at number 1. We have Indiana coming in at number 2. But then we get our first big change. Obviously, Texas A&M falls after their loss to Texas. And they drop all the way to number 7. Here's the projected bracket, by the way, for the YouTube crowd. Georgia slides up to the number 3 spot. Texas Tech slides up to the number 4 spot. And then Oregon moves it to number 5. Ole Miss actually moves up a spot after losing Lane Kiffin, which I'm not too mad about because I don't think they should be punished for that. And then Texas A&M drops to number 7. Oklahoma slides in at number 8. Alabama moves above Notre Dame, which is magic to my ears, at number 9. Notre Dame drops to 10. And then we have the two conference champion, highest ranked conference champion spots there in the first bracket. But Miami is in at number 12. Texas moves up to number 13 after beating A&M, ahead of Vanderbilt, who is now number 14. And then Utah is at number 15, dropping pretty much far out of it. BYU obviously is at number 11 as well, heading into the Big 12 championship. Harrison, Aggies dropping to number 7 is a little bit further than I thought they were going to drop.
Yeah, but it does work out, Matt, because in the path that we talked about the other week, we said, what's a better spot outside of maybe being the 4 seed? And we talked about that 7-10 matchup because you get a matchup versus Indiana, probably the most favorable of the top 4 seeds. Maybe you say Texas Tech is probably the most favorable now. But in terms of the top 4, I would say the Indiana is probably the better matchup for Texas A&M in terms of winnable matchups. I really like that. Obviously, you get to host a home game versus Notre Dame, a rematch in Kyle Field versus the Fighting Irish. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a little bit farther than I thought they would drop. I thought you would see them drop to maybe 6, just because I don't think. Well, and you could even make a case they could have been 5. With A&M's resume, I'm like, maybe you make a case they should be 5. But in terms of, I'm sorry, that was a little out there. But in terms of where they're at, I think it's a really good spot to be in because aside from the rematch with Notre Dame, which at home in Kyle Field, and obviously with the history there, you'd assume Aggies would be favored. You should feel pretty confident that A&M can win that matchup again. I know it's hard to beat a team twice, but I look at the bracket right now and I'm like, if that's the way it shakes out here, which I don't think it will. I think the 2 seed is going to be different. I think the 3 and 4 seed will probably be different as well. One of Texas A&M or Georgia is going to be in this, and one of Ohio State and Indiana will be in the top 4. I don't think you have 2 Big Ten teams in the top 4 after this weekend. Maybe I'm wrong, but in terms of how it shakes out right now for the penultimate rankings, I think that's a nice road for Texas A&M. You beat Notre Dame at home. You go on, you play Indiana, probably one of the weakest of the top 4 seeds. Then you play the winner of Georgia and whoever they play in that second round game.
Yeah, and what I'm kind of curious about here is, will the college football playoff continue to favor the Big Ten? Because it seems kind of like that's what they're doing right now, at least in my opinion. If Texas A&M drops 4 spots after losing to Texas, I feel like Indiana should drop at least 3 or 4 spots if they lose to Ohio State. which would put them around, 5 or 6. Then you start to have the conversation about Ole Miss versus Oregon. Which one of those teams potentially gets the higher seed? Does Texas Tech move up then to that number 2, 3 spot? Does Georgia, if they beat Alabama, move up to that number 2 spot? How those things shake out. Really, to me, the last seed that's going to be up for grabs here, regardless, is going to be that number 4 seed. I would be inclined to give that to Ole Miss because I think they have a better resume than Oregon. But the committee seems to favor the Big Ten a little bit, so perhaps Oregon would be another team to get, another big team getting in there to get a bye. We'll have to see how that shakes out. But in terms of, some of these matchups, potentially what they could be, I like Texas A&M being in this number 7 spot. Number 5 would have been nice because then you got to go play, with these rankings at least, you got to go play Texas Tech if you win or when you win that first round game against what could end up being James Madison or Tulane. That's going to be an easy road there. You get Texas Tech in the quarterfinal, who I'd probably rather have than Indiana, but then you got to play Ohio State in the semis if you're going to get anywhere. I'd rather play Georgia than Ohio State. I'll tell you that. Ohio State has beaten everybody on their schedule with the exception of Texas by 3 scores. So if you can avoid them on the other side of the bracket, that would be preferable if you're Texas A&M. This matchup with Notre Dame is particularly interesting to me because that was such an even matchup earlier in September. If it's not for the missed extra point by Notre Dame there in the final moments of that game, we're probably looking at an overtime game, which would have been super exciting to watch. But Texas A&M drives down the field, gets in the end zone on a 4th down, and takes the lead and wins that football game. You know that Notre Dame is seething about that one. You know that they're going to travel well to this game. They think that they're a better team than Texas A&M. So that would be a very, very exciting matchup. I honestly believe that Texas A&M would smoke Notre Dame the second time around. I think Notre Dame is a little bit overrated, in my opinion. I think Texas A&M has just gotten better throughout the season than they were in September. So it would be interesting to watch. I would like the second round matchup against Indiana if I'm Texas A&M as well. I think that you outclass them at just about every position except maybe quarterback because Fernando Mendoza might win the Heisman Trophy. He's been really good this year, obviously. And I think you match up pretty well with Georgia. I do. That would be a really exciting one. But at the end of the day, at least you didn't drop to 8.
Because
at
then
least
you're
you
on
don't
your
have to.
hurts.
Yeah, at least you don't have to. You don't have to go up against Alabama and then potentially Ohio State. That would be a really tough road.
Well, and here's the other thing, Matt. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe we disagree here. If I'm picking Georgia to win or to lose the SEC championship, I don't think A&M falls below Georgia. I think A&M vaults up in the event of a Georgia loss. So you're probably looking at Georgia being 7. A&M probably moves up, I would assume, along with Ole Miss and maybe Oregon, although I don't think Oregon sneaks into the top 4, so maybe Oregon stays put. But I think maybe there needs to be some reshuffling in the event Georgia drops with a loss in the SEC championship. Granted, I think Georgia will still and should host a home playoff game in the event they lose at 10-2. I would assume the Aggies move up. I assume the Aggies will be ranked ahead of Georgia unless you say Georgia lost the SEC championship. They got there, so we can't put them below the Aggies. But I can't see a world where you have Georgia. I mean, maybe what happens here, Matt, is Texas or OU drops out of hosting. Georgia takes that 8th slot, and that's how it shakes out here. But I mean, beyond that, beyond the hypotheticals, Matt, I want to say this because it's been in the conversation for weeks now, and I'm scared that college football and the regular season is further going to be compromised. It's already compromised to a bit. Yes, we are getting better matchups in conference play, which is awesome. I'm here for good matchups. I love seeing Texas A&M play Texas. I love seeing Texas A&M play LSU. I love seeing Texas A&M play Florida. I love seeing it. It's awesome. The fact that we're getting a Georgia-Alabama matchup twice in one season is awesome. But we're ruining the product out of conference. We're getting to a point where some teams are playing basically all conference, playing 9 conference games and middle school teams for the other 3 matchups. And it's infuriating. It is, because there is a lot at stake with these playoff rankings. They have to get it right. Otherwise, we're going to see a whole lot of middle school teams playing these Power 5 conference title college football playoff contending teams. Like, the fact that Indiana and Ohio State, now I'm going to give them both credit. Ohio State, you haven't had anyone come within 3 scores of you other than Texas. But you're playing with a 2-game season, and not even really a 2-game season if you're Ohio State. Really just a 1-game season at this point, because you've only had one team stay within a score of you. But Indiana's played a bunch of mid outside of Oregon, a 1-game schedule. And they're ranked 45th and 46th, respectively, in strength of schedule rankings per ESPN. And you have a team like Texas A&M, who's been more battle-tested, who went on the road early in the year and beat Notre Dame. Granted, it was on the last drive, but they're ranked 15th in strength of schedule. And they have 1 loss. They have a better resume. They also have a better resume than a team that's ranked above them at number 5, Oregon, in my opinion. They have a statement win. You also have a better strength of schedule and better resume than Ole Miss. I'm sorry. Sorry to your Rebels. But strength of schedule does not seem to matter like we thought it was going to matter. And it seems like the regular season product, is going to suffer because of it, because there's no incentive anymore for Texas A&M to play Notre Dame if you can go play Indiana's schedule and just have a great record and get in.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's what our next segment is going to be. So after this break from our sponsor, we're gonna figure out, did the committee get this right? So stick with us after this break, and we'll be right back. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending someone something memorable to a family or friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in, because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. I've given Omaha Steaks as a gift before, and the reaction is always the same: excitement when the box arrives, and even bigger smiles when everything hits the grill. So save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off of select favorites during their cyber sale. And for additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. All right, Harrison, did the CFP get it right? That's the question that everybody wants to know with the penultimate rankings. There's one more week to figure this out, and it feels like a week that shouldn't come into the conversation when it comes to figuring it out, quite honestly, because what's the point in playing a conference championship game if it's going to hurt you in the CFP race? That's why we had the discussions even as soon as yesterday, about Texas A&M losing the game to Texas. Does it really matter? I mean, sure, it matters, because you don't get to go to Atlanta for the first time ever in the history of your program since you've been in the SEC. You don't get a chance to win an SEC championship, but you're still guaranteed a playoff spot. You get to host a playoff game, and you're probably in a more favorable position in terms of your path to the championship than had you won that game. Obviously, I had some Texas fans in the comments in the last video. They said it was coping. They said this, they said that, whatever. Texas won the game. That's fine. Texas A&M still in the playoff. Texas is still on the outside looking in. Deal with it. The rest of the rankings, though, I don't think they got it right. It's not the top 4. It's not. You could argue Ole Miss over Oregon. Like, I would pick Ole Miss's resume over Oregon. You could flip flop either of those two. They're both 11-1. Whatever. You drop down to number 7 at Texas A&M. I think that's probably right. Oklahoma at number 8 is probably right. But here is where the whole conversation comes into me about this whole thing being wrong. Notre Dame being ranked above Miami is ridiculous. They beat Notre Dame head-to-head in September, And now that Notre Dame is ranked ahead of them, albeit by one spot in the rankings, neither of them are going to play another game. So how is that going to change? I mean, I suppose the committee could change their mind during the last rankings, but I find that hard to believe. What is the point in playing these big out of conference games in September if they don't matter? Like, you could have the conversation about Texas and Ohio State. Should Texas have scheduled Ohio State? Should that game be counted against Texas because they chose to go up to Ohio to Columbus and play the number one team in the country, lose by a score? Well, if you're Texas, don't lose to Florida. But if you're Miami, why are you scheduling this game? It obviously doesn't help you in your college football playoff run if you have the same record, a better resume, and you beat them and you're still not ahead of them. So what this is probably going to do is this is going to incentivize teams like Miami, like Texas, like Alabama, who plays Ohio State in 2026, I believe, or 2027, somewhere down the line. Oklahoma playing Michigan, all these teams playing these big out-of-conference games, especially with the SEC switching to a nine-game schedule. It doesn't matter anymore because the head-to-head is not taken into account. And if we're really led to believe that the head-to-head doesn't count in September, then why should it count in the conference championship game? Why should we say that, well, this game isn't, even though we said this game isn't going to count against Texas to the same level as losing to a Florida or whatever, is this game, does this game matter or not? And now we hold that same standard for the conference championship game? None of that makes sense to me. So what I think this is going to do is all these teams, if Miami doesn't get in above Notre Dame, are going to say, hey, screw this. Let's ditch all the out-of-conference games. Let's take the Indiana route, play Kennesaw State, Indiana State, and whoever the hell else they played, Old Dominion, because it doesn't matter. As long as you win games, you're in. And now the TV networks are going to lose millions of dollars because you're not going to have Texas, Ohio State at the beginning of the year. You're not going to have Notre Dame and Miami. You're not going to have LSU and Clemson. And all that's going to go away, and it's going to ruin college football. Or, here's the other thing, it's going to basically be used as a soapbox for the college football playoff committee to stand on and say, well, I told you we needed to switch to 16 games instead of 12. And then it just gets bigger and it just gets worse.
Yeah, and it's Alabama's already done it today, Matt. I believe Alabama already canceled. What series was it? Hold on. They canceled a out-of-conference game today. They rescheduled it and replaced it with they moved USF in one. Hold on. I saw it this morning, and I want to bring it back up because it's already happening. It's already happening. Let's see. What'd they do? The Crimson Tide and South Florida mutually agreed to move the 2026 game to 2032. Obviously, it's USF, so not the biggest of matchups, but they've replaced it. They have not replaced it. I guess that's their instead of playing USF, they will play Chattanooga in 2026.
Or UT Martin or one of those other type schools.
Yeah, they will play
and it's
Chattanooga.
It's 70-0, and it's not going to matter, and nobody's going to watch it.
And look, USF wasn't going to be this great out-of-conference game. It's not Texas, Ohio State, but at least USF was in the playoff conversation and, is going to be one of the top G5 schools potentially next season. So it's not the least, boring, easy matchup that it was. So, I mean, it's already happening, and I promise you, just because I've seen Steve Sarkisian was on his media tour, which is crazy. I can't believe we're having political campaigns for the college football playoff rankings these days. That's kind of, and then Vandy's sending out the stat sheet about all their facts about why they should be in. The day Texas is left out, I'm going to give it 48 hours. You're going to get news that the Texas non-conference schedule will have some changes to it. And I think that will be reflected by others. That's not a case just specific to Texas. That's going to be reflected across college football as a whole. So, look, and the precedent's already been set. The playoff committee already has precedent in terms of saying, hey, record doesn't matter over results, resume, and the eye test. Because back in 2023, you left a undefeated FSU team out so you could put in the SEC champion, Alabama, who I believe was one loss at the time, had beaten Georgia, a previously undefeated team in the SEC championship. You put them in over an undefeated team because the undefeated team lost its quarterback and proceeded to have two stinkers of offensive games, including their conference championship. So the precedent's already set, Matt. Like, they are not going out of their way to say, hey, eye test be damn, or resume and record be damn. I don't want to say resume. Record be damn. We're going to go with resume and eye test.
Yeah, and here's the problem with the eye test thing. And I totally agree with you, but here's the problem when you talk about eye test.
It's all subjective.
It's all subjective, number one, but these college football playoff deciders aren't watching every game that's being played by these playoff teams. There's 2 representatives from the Big 12, 2 representatives from the SEC, 2 representatives from the Big 10, 2 from the ACC, and a few other guys. Do you think that the Big 12 representative is watching Miami versus Virginia or whatever? I'm just naming like a random matchup off the top of my head, but like, are they watching, or is the Big 10 representative watching the Duke Virginia game this weekend? No, they're not. They're watching the Big 10 championship. And then they're looking at the box score for the SEC championship and for the Big 12 championship and for the other games. That is where this whole thing comes screaming off the rails. It's hypocrisy everywhere. Miami is probably going to be the team that has the biggest claim to gripe and complain about this whole process this season. But, you know, you could talk about Ole Miss or South Carolina or Alabama last year when SMU lost in the ACC championship game and still got in and then got absolutely dump trucked in their first round game. Do you think that Alabama or Ole Miss or South Carolina would have put up that much of a stinker against, who was it, Penn State? I don't think so. Like, so, you know, this is going to start a chain reaction that is going to derail this whole situation, whether it's teams canceling out of conference games, like Texas canceling Ohio State and Michigan, or Miami canceling Notre Dame, or whatever the other matchups are, or it's going to create a 16-team playoff, which nobody wants to see. It should be 8 teams, and there should be a committee of people who actually watch all of these football games that matter. I'm talking about football people, Nick Saban, you know, former head coaches, former, you know, people who watch the games, former players who, just because the game's being played on a Saturday doesn't mean they're not going on a Monday and watching the tape and seeing what the eye test says. Because if you look at the eye test, Texas is better than BYU. Texas is better than Notre Dame. Texas is better than this team or the other. Miami's better than this team. Miami's better than that team. Like, you can go on down the list, and teams like Utah are number 5. Like, they should never have been in the conversation in the first place. They never beat a ranked team. And now if Duke beats Virginia, we're going to get James Madison in the playoff? Give me a break.
And I hate to bring this up because we've already talked about it and everybody talks about it. It's low-hanging fruit at this point, but you're going to allow a team into the playoffs that you're telling us isn't even a top 15 team in the country. Tulane, if they win out, they win their conference, is going to be in as a 12 seed despite being ranked number 20.
Yep. Or North Texas, like, if they beat Tulane.
Yeah, like, how does that make sense? It doesn't. We want the 12, or supposedly you want the 12 best teams in the college football playoff. Yet you're going to get maybe the 8 best teams in the college football playoffs and 2 who are there because they have to be there. And then the other 2 are just, yeah, you have the record.
Yep.
So it's the 8 best teams, Matt, and the hell with the rest.
Here's my fix for the college football playoffs. No more automatic qualifiers. That way, the top 12 in the rankings are the 12 teams that get in. Texas is still left out in that conversation, but Miami's in. BYU is in. Hell, BYU deserves to be in above Tulane and James Madison. So
no automatic qualifiers, and figure something out with conference championships. I look, I've covered the SEC championship before. I'm going to cover it again this weekend. I love that game. That game's awesome, in person and on TV. I want it to mean something. It needs to mean something. And maybe you disagree with me, Matt. Maybe others disagree with me. But we got to figure out a way where that game still means something. I don't know how you do that because you've expanded the field and you've essentially made it meaningless. But it needs to mean something. It does, because as long as I've been watching the sport, it's been around.
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's change gears, Harrison. We're coming off of an ugly Texas A&M Texas game on Friday, and it was a big loss for Texas A&M. But they're still in the playoff. They're still a lock, so that's a good thing. But there are some concerns that arose from that game. We're going to talk about, we already talked about what went wrong yesterday, but we're going to tell you exactly what Texas exposed in this Texas A&M football team and what they could fix in their playoff run coming up next after this message from our sponsors. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You can pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. You can pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for the fine print. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or even event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Whew, boy, we got a little heated in that last one, Harrison, and that's fine because, we have reasons. The college football playoff is a mess. And we knew it was going to be a mess, but it is what it is. Texas A&M still in that playoff, despite their ugly loss to Texas. They had a 10-3 lead going into halftime. They had the ball coming out in the second half, and then Texas just took it from there, ended up outscoring them 24-7 in the second half behind a dominant run game from Trey Wisner, Arch Manning making some big-time plays. And it gives you a little bit of concern because some of the things that we thought Texas A&M could get beaten with throughout the season that they had overcome really came out in this football game. And, we don't have a lot of time in this segment. We're kind of running over a little bit, so we'll keep it kind of short. But the first thing for me, Harrison, was Texas whipped them on the line of scrimmage on both sides. And it really makes you think, is this something that if Texas A&M gets matched up with Notre Dame in round one at Kyle Field, will the Irish be able to do the same thing?
It does make you wonder. It certainly is an interesting question in terms of when you talk about the SEC being a line of scrimmage league, and you look at some of the top teams in the playoff rankings right now, most of them match up talent-wise, star rating-wise with A&M up front. So most concerning to me, Matt, is, again, the inability to stop the run against a Texas team that has not run the ball well at all this year. They were inside the top 100, barely, in rushing offense coming into this game. Have struggled not only just against Georgia, but pretty much everybody else aside from A&M at running the football. And I get it. Run defense hasn't been exactly the strength of Texas A&M under Elko. But we talk about it all the time. And God, this brings out the Cowboy fan in me. You have to earn the right to rush the passer. And I hate saying that because it led to trading Micah Parsons. But hey, you got Quentin Williams, so I guess I'll shut up.
Don't get me started on that one, man.
I'm sorry. You got to stop the run because you got to make them one-dimensional. And that's what Texas' offense has been all year long. and then they play a Texas A&M team who's had a really good pass rush by all accounts, and they neutralize them because they're able to run the ball. And that's the biggest thing. That was exposed, and then obviously for me, you got to figure out something in terms of offensive success against these guys. You got to figure out something. You can't go into a shell against this team. I get it. Pete Kwiatkowski does a great job, and he's been there for a couple of years now. He's had 2 back-to-back years with really good defenses. But Matt, as we talked about in the preview show, this was a Texas secondary that was struggling, had to bust assignments left and right, giving up some big plays, and we didn't really see that. And A&M was one of the more explosive offenses in the country, and there weren't explosive plays there. And you got to go back to the drawing board and figure out why. Because Texas, yes, is going to be one of the better defensive lines that Texas A&M plays all year, but heck, I mean, there's a possibility where you could see an Oklahoma in the playoffs at some point down the road. Alabama has a really talented defensive line. Like, there are some good defensive lines out there. Ohio State has a pretty good defensive line. So there's some matchups in the playoffs that could present some of the same challenges that Texas poses. And you got to go back and figure out like why you can't find the same success that you found earlier in the year.
Well, I think another thing too, kind of on that same coin, defensively with Texas, I think they just bullied Texas A&M. They were much more physical than anyone has been with Texas A&M's offense this year, not just on the line of scrimmage, but with the receivers. And they played, Texas hadn't played a lot of press coverage this year. They've been sitting back in zone and kind of letting you dink and dunk down the field. They didn't do that against Texas A&M. They got right up on Mario Craver and KC Concepcion. They made him beat him off the line. And when they caught the ball, they punished them. And they got a lot of pressure on Marcel Reed. The linebackers played really well, and it kind of threw off Marcel because his timing was off in multiple ways. He threw a couple picks late that really made a difference. But it seems like if you run the football on this team and you're the more physical team defensively than they are offensively, then they're going to fold. And look, despite what some people in the comments think, I've been championing Texas A&M all year long as the best team in the country, and I projected them to win the national championship and the SEC championship. I was wrong on the second. I still think I could be right on the first. But if they're going to do that, you got to fix these problems. You got to fix these things that Texas has exposed in you 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row, Texas was the more physical team defensively. 2 years in a row, they ran the football on you, and this is what happened. That's what Notre Dame did to you last year, too. Notre Dame damn near did that this year, except Texas A&M was able to fix, they only allowed one of those things to happen. Notre Dame ran the football well. They didn't out-physical them on the defensive side. If Notre Dame can figure out a way to do that, if they match up with Texas A&M in round one, they're going to be in a good spot. If you play Alabama, that's a little different maybe. Their defense hasn't exactly been what we all thought. But if you play Oklahoma, that's the best defense in the country. And they are very physical. So you got to figure out ways to make those things happen. This, RPO, one read defense or offense and getting guys in space and all that stuff is great until you face a team that can get up on you and be physical with you and move you off your spot and change your timing. And that's what Texas did, and that's what some of these teams in the college football playoff will be able to do if Texas A&M isn't careful. I still think they can overcome it. I still think they have a really damn good shot to win a national championship, but they got to fix these problems, Harrison, and they got to do it quick.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. A lot of the same things that we talk about with Texas A&M and the issues they have versus Texas are the same that Texas talks about with Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Just being the more physical team.
It's funny because, everybody talks about Texas can't beat Georgia and Oklahoma can't beat, it really is like Oklahoma can't beat Texas.
There's a cycle here. Everybody has their own cycle here.
It's Texas can't beat Georgia. Georgia can't beat Alabama. Alabama can't beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma can't beat Texas. And there's all of that stuff that goes into it. It's really funny. And I don't think that Texas A&M can't beat Texas. I don't think that's the case. I think if you played this game 10 times, it's probably 6-4 Texas A&M because they let it get away from him in the second half. But, here we are. And now you're the number 7 seed, so we'll see where that goes. But that's going to do it for another episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every day, and for making Locked On Aggies Locked On the network, the number 1 sports podcast network. For your next listen, please check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy breaks down the best conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship game and every game in between. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast, download our podcast. We're on every major podcast platform. Follow me on X at Matt Galatzan. Follow Harrison on X at Harrison Reno. Follow the podcast on X at Locked On Aggies. And we will see you next time. I'm sorry that Vandy got jumped, by the way, Harrison. I know that was really tough for you.
Hey, but at least they're 10-2.
True.